Okay, I think we're recording. Yes. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Med Mentor Monday. Today we're going to be talking about Mcat study strategies, especially relevant over the winter quarter. It's coming up, and a lot of people have more free time to start studying for the Mcat. So we got a ton of questions, like more questions than I think I've ever seen in RSVP, in the RSVP form. So that's awesome. And since we've done Mcat topics before, maybe we can do some Mcat questions, and then I want to pull like a lot more questions from the RSVP, which are a little more specific. But yeah, just to change it up a little bit. Great. So we're just going to go ahead and start with like a quick round of introductions from our panelists. Just going to say like name, where you're from, where you went to undergrad, and did you take a gap year?
Okay, I can start. I am Candace Wang. Oh God, I already forgot all the questions. Okay, so I went to undergrad at Berkeley. I'm an MS1 first year, and I'm also in the MD PhD track. So it's my first year of many. And then, I don't remember any of the questions. I keep trying. Every time I do this, this is always so hard.
Did you take a gap year?
And I did not take a gap year. I went straight through. There we go.
Cool.
So I can go. So I'm Chong. I'm also an MS1. I took 2 gap years doing research, and I went to Duke for my undergrad, and I'm from South Carolina.
I can go next. My name is Amelia. So happy to be here. I went to undergrad in Cleveland, Ohio at Case Western Reserve University. And I grew up in the Bay Area, South Bay, for those of you who are familiar. And yeah, I think that was everything, right?
Did you take a gap year?
No, I did not take a gap year, straight through.
Hi, my name is Sabena. I did my undergrad in Troy University. It's in Alabama. I took a gap year and then also did a master's. And I'm in the regular MS program. I'm in medical program.
Great. Thank you all so much for being here today. Okay, so on to some MCAT related questions. So how soon did you start studying for the MCAT, and what did your study schedule look like?
Okay, mine was it started off very traditional in terms of like I wanted to take the entire summer to, study, and then I would take it at the end of the summer. So it was May, and then I studied through August, and I would take it like late August or something like that. My study schedule was supposed to be I would study after I got off work, and it did not end up going that way because I was tired from going to work. So I tried to study, but then I felt unprepared, so I ended up delaying my MCAT. But I did end up studying for it. And honestly, I will tell you, do not take more than 3 months to study for the MCAT ever, because you just get sick of it. You're not going to really gain anything from it, and you're just going to hate the whole experience. So that's my little tidbit on how I studied for it, or I guess the timing.
So I had like a sort of similar like realization like as I started studying, because I actually took it like pretty recently. I took it like July of this year actually. So I ended up applying like last cycle, like super late. Sorry, not this year, last year, my bad. But I like started studying like the December before. And I had originally planned to take it like that March, but I ended up like delaying it all the way to July because I also had like a pretty like demanding job during that time, and like I also tried to like go to work, and then I was like I had my study schedules, like I'm gonna come home and like study, and I was just like exhausted. It was like a really bad like combination. I think like one thing that actually helped me, and like this is not true for a lot of people, but like for me, like when the pandemic like hit, everything was like work from home, and it actually made my schedule a lot more flexible, so I was able to like like divide out chunks of my day. And I feel like my brain was usually like more like fresh in the morning. So I would try to like study in the mornings, then I would like do work, and then I'll like study a bit in the afternoon. But I agree with Candace that like it definitely like don't try to like extend your study time for like a super long like time, because you end up like forgetting all the information that you like tried to learn like in the beginning. So I think what really helped me the most was like the last like few months, I just like really intensely like try to study a lot every day, and also like just doing a ton of practice problems, I think was what like helped me in the end. Yeah, but it's like a very difficult exam, so I really feel for you guys.
Yeah, I can talk about mine. So I had a similar plan to Candace's, where I started studying in May and I took the exam in August. Although I think I didn't know a lot of people doing it that way. I thought that a lot more people sort of studied the fall of their junior year and then took it either in January or in March. At least a lot of my friends did it that way, and I didn't really have a lot of like study buddies over my very lonely summer. But my study schedule was pretty much the way that everybody else described. I had a research internship during the day. I would come home by like 6 or 7 at night, and then I would study through the night, get up and do the same thing. And then over the weekends, I would do one practice exam leading up to my exam in August. And I completely agree with Trong that the best thing that you can do is the practice problems and the practice exams. And without that, like, I mean, you can study material, but arguably and hopefully you've taken these classes sort of in a rigorous way in college, and you know the material. Hopefully your MCAT studying is much more geared towards practice, application, and sort of exam techniques, which are very, very important during the MCAT, in my opinion.
So I wish I was as organized as you guys. I was a very hot mess. I took the MCAT twice. The first time I took it, I was working full time. And again, yeah, I would try to study after work. Didn't happen. And so I tried to study for the MCAT in 2 weeks, which was not a good idea. And so I decided to retake the exam. My score was just okay. And I took the second exam after studying for less than a month. And so I think, I mean, do not do what I did if you know you cannot like sit down and grind. But I would agree. I think Candace mentioned, don't try to stretch your studying out for like more than like 4 months or so. Just, I think at some point you really do need to sit down and like organize yourself and kind of like I think Emily also mentioned, do a lot of practice questions and some content review.
Just to jump in really quickly, like I used to tutor for Kaplan, like the MCAT, tutoring the MCAT. And this is something that they always said, don't study for more than 3 months. And the second part was, you will never feel ready. So you can study as much as you want, and you will never know everything that's on the exam. And that's kind of the point. They don't want someone to know everything. Like there's a whole aspect of critical thinking to it. So, you know, whatever works, whatever works.
I think going along that, I started to realize like the more I studied, like a lot of the questions were like, as long as you had like a baseline under like a familiarity with like the terms they presented, like it was like, especially like for the bio section, for instance, I realized a lot of the questions were more designed towards like, do you understand the research like methodology they're presenting? And can you figure out like, what is the best way to like, you know, like support like this experiment, or like what goes against this experiment? And so I think it was a lot more about like reasoning versus like knowing the content. I mean, you definitely need to know the content, but like I think in the beginning I over focused on content. I tried to like memorize like everything in the Kaplan books, and there's way too much stuff in the Kaplan books. It's so overwhelming. So I think it's like a lot more important to like try to strengthen your like critical reasoning skills. And there's like different kinds of reasoning, I feel, for like the biology portion versus like the physics portion versus like cars. I wasn't like the best at cars, so I'm probably not good at giving advice about cars, but I feel like for like physics, it was a lot like just like finding the like formulas like in the long passage they had and like trying to like pick those out and like using those, and then everything else was like irrelevant in the passage. So just like trying to figure out like what is like relevant for like the question they're asking like from the passage, and like not focusing so much on like knowing all of the content.
Great. So how did you split your time between content review and practice exams / questions? Did you do those at the same time, or did you do one first and then the other, or how'd you do that?
I did them at the same time. The only time that I could do full length practice exams, which I really strongly believe you have to do a lot of full length practice exams if you want to feel even a little bit prepared for the test. So the only time I could do full lengths were on the weekend, because I had something going on throughout the whole week. So I structured it so that I was doing a full length at the end of every week. And by nature of that, I was doing sort of the practice along with the content review. I completely agree with everything that everyone said about the content review sort of being a little bit less, but I think that for the psych and soc section, for me, that was almost entirely memorization. And so I actually had a really disproportionate content review in which like 80% of my content review was psych and soc. And then the rest of it was, do I remember the steps of these cycles? Do I know these, in general, do I know these concepts? And then I would reason through the science sections. And then CARS is also critical analysis and reading. And so that's a little self-explanatory, but psych and soc I really thought was you had to know the concepts, and it would just give you a bunch of words that sounded the same, like structural functionalism and functional structuralism and all that good stuff, and like you just had to know it. So actually, like content review, the only time that I'd say that was really, really helpful is psych and soc. And then as many practice questions as you can, as early as you can, it will help.
Yeah, I can go next. I very, very similar to Amelia's plan. I did very little content review, and I focused almost entirely on psych soc, and then a little bit on the chemistries, biochem, biochem, gen chem, and then a little bit of OChem. With biology, I was like, you know what? I was a pre-med. I'm just gonna try to remember as much as I could. I didn't really try to study biology at all. And again, with doing a lot of practice questions, I got to determine my weaknesses in the areas that I wasn't like actively reviewing. And so that helped me to do a very targeted content review of those specific areas. And I think that really helped. I use UWorld. I don't know if any of the other panelists use that, in addition to like Kaplan for like referencing. And I thought that really helped. And with PsychSoc, I used there's so many Quizlet decks online. And so I used a lot of the pre-made Quizlet decks, and I just straight up memorized. There was just no way around it because, again, the terms are very, very similar. And I feel like that's the easiest section, PsychSoc, to just get easy points just by understanding different definitions. And so that was kind of how I did mine.
So I agree with what these two gals just said, but also personal experience. I spent that 3 months that I mentioned earlier doing a lot of content review, and I really wasn't seeing that score improvement. And that's kind of why I panicked and I pushed off the exam. And then during winter break, I took 1 month and I studied the exam, not even full time because I was still working at that time. But instead of doing just content review, and I didn't even make it through all the content review, mind you, but by just doing practice problems, by doing practice exam, by doing practice passages, my score jumped massively. So I think if anything, that tells you more about the structure of the exam, the structure of the questions, just by having familiarity with the question stems, just having familiarity with the way that they're asking the questions and what they want you to know. It makes it easier to tease out okay, if you take the exam, let's say you take a practice exam and you look at it and you're like, okay, I'm really struggling with amino acids. You can go back and study your amino acids, right? That gives you a much more time efficient and pointed way to study rather than being like, oh God, I got to read the entire Kaplan books. And again, like I mentioned earlier, even Kaplan will tell, like we regularly used to tell our 2Ds, like, there's too much stuff in these books, okay? You don't need to know everything in here. That, you know, you can do perfectly great on these exams without knowing all these things on the books. So that's just something to keep in mind while like you make your study plans.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone's saying. I had like a similar like trajectory as Candace, where like I also like way over focused on content review in the beginning, and I just like never saw my score like improve. It was just like the same score like every exam, and I got really, really frustrated. And then I took some of the like I started working through like the question banks for AMC, which I think are like extremely, extremely helpful. I actually like redid the question banks twice just because I realized that like those question styles were like really good for prepping you for like the real thing. And my score jumped like 10 points. Like it was like so much. It like all came from like just doing the question banks and just like doing the like AMC like material. And you might get like conflicting like advice about this. For me, I felt it was helpful for me to like look at the AMC stuff like earlier. I know some people recommend like looking at like as like the last thing before the exam, and I can see like the benefit to that approach. I think for me, like I just had to redo the AMC materials like multiple times, and that's what really like helped me like figure out like how they would ask the questions and like really understand like in terms of like being a better test taker. I think like doing that earlier in my test preparation like really prepared me well.
It's also my sort of personal opinion that content review is like, it is good, but at a certain point, it's just a mechanism of procrastination in like a very active way. And I really think that a lot of people can fall, and I did too, can fall trapped to using content review as a way to put off practice exams. And like, that's not going to help you. That's not productive. It, like people said, it doesn't increase your score. So just get into the practice stuff. You won't be wasting resources. That was a big issue for me too. I sort of had the same thought of like, should I leave the AAMC stuff for later when I'm sort of more progressed, and like, just do it. You won't be wasting resources. You can take exams over again. The practice comes with reading the questions, like Chong just said. I also just wanted to put a little disclaimer out there, because I did not use, the only paid resource I used, I should say, was I paid to use the Princeton Review practice exams just as a mechanism of getting more practice exams. But I didn't use any kind of like content review, like self-study, like self-pacing course. I used none of that. I used entirely the notes I took in my college level classes, the textbooks from those classes, and then the free AAMC resources for question banks and practice exams. And then the only thing I paid for was to have more practice exams, because that's the only resource I felt like was worth paying for. And it worked out just fine for me. That's not to say that these resources aren't useful. I'm sure they are, but the cost of medical school and the cost of getting to medical school racks up real fast. And it's my personal opinion that you don't need to pay for this particular part of your journey.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's hard to, you guys are getting ahead and answering all my questions, which is great because it's less work for me, but okay. So you all mentioned having other commitments, whether it was a job or, you know, applications for other things or travel for holidays. So how did you balance the rest of your life with MCAT studying?
I'm gonna be very honest. There's not a very good balance. It's always gonna come at a bad time. If you are lucky enough to have the privilege that you can just set out time the entire, like just to study from morning to night, blessings to you. I'm very happy. But for a lot of people, that's not gonna be the case, and you're gonna have to balance that with other things. And I don't even like to call it a balance, because it's really not a balance. It's gonna be hard. And you're gonna sometimes have to do more work. Sometimes you have to do more studying, and sometimes you're gonna be tired. But this is just a part of the journey. And once you get past it, like just study where you can, take the exam, get it done, and this is past, you know, this is done. And I think it's just important to keep in perspective that the few point difference in the score is not the difference between getting into like some school or not getting into some school. It is part of the application, but it is not the entirety of it. And so if you are balancing that with a job or research or school or something else, those things are equally important to your application. So just keep that in mind when this whole chaotic thing is going on.
Yeah, I really feel that. I think that like one thing to like really try to, and this is like really hard to prioritize, I know because I struggle with it, but like try to like take care of your mental health too, because it is going to be a really stressful time. I remember like it was like 4th of July weekend and some of my friends were hanging out and I was like so stressed because I just like needed to study, but I also was like, I also really need a break, and I took that break, and I think like that like recovery helped me like study like harder the next day. So I feel like check in with yourself. Like if you are like dead exhausted and like nothing is sticking in your brain, like just take a nap. Like take an hour to go for a walk. Like it's not gonna like change your score. I think like getting enough rest before the exam and just like trying to like be your like at your best like mentally is like more important. But as Candace said, like it's really hard, the idea of the concept of balance. I feel like even like work-life balance, like it's really hard, and like I feel like we're always going to be struggling with it. But I think the best thing you can do is just like try to like take breaks, try to like care for yourself throughout the process, and like it'll be okay.
And I think too, that goes back to the point of like not taking so much time to study, because I feel like it's just a prolonged period of stress. Just I guess when you are ready to start studying for it, it's never going to be a perfect time. I should like preface, there's never going to be like a perfect chunk of time. When I was taking or studying for it, I was in the middle of my master's, and so yeah, it wasn't a perfect time. But I felt I was like, this is it. I'm ready. I'm gonna do this. And then I was able to like sit down and do it again. I did take a lot of breaks. But yeah, it's just a matter of not doing it for too long, because it's so studying for the MCAT is also stressful. Like not the anticipation, everything about that process is stressful. And so just make sure like take some mentally, like, okay, I'm gonna study for like a month, like set that date and then work towards it, and just take the exam. Don't prolong the struggle, please.
It's kind of like getting a shot, you know, like the more you think about it, the worse it's going to get. And sometimes you just have to sit down, take a deep breath, and just do it. And thinking about it longer, prolonging it to another date, like it's the inevitable. It's going to happen. So just do it. Do it. And you will be fine, because you will never feel prepared. You will never feel ready, and you will never probably feel good about it. And that's okay. That's how like 99% of people go into that exam feeling. And you probably will walk out feeling like that too, but you will still be okay.
And one thing
is, yeah, sorry, Chang. I just wanted to say that Candace's comparison made me laugh because we've been vaccinating kids. And it's literally so true. I'm sorry, Chang. I just wanted to just say really quickly, like we have been stressing the importance of not prolonging your study time, but I wanted to just point out that like that's not a hard and fast rule, because ultimately what we're trying to say is that this exam and the preparation for this exam requires a significant level of introspection about the kind of like knowledge you have coming in and the kind of stamina you have coming in, and it's about how you study best for the things that you find difficult, and ultimately no one can tell you how to make that work. And you know, I can only speak from my experience, in which yes, I did have something full-time while I was studying for the MCAT, and that was a stressor for me. But I didn't have, you know, I wasn't caring for family members. I had reliable transportation. I had a study space. You know, I had a lot of things that helped me to shorten my study time. And if I knew that I wasn't in a place where, like, if I knew that I needed more study time because I was sort of limited by my resources, I would have planned for that. And so just like that, you have to sort of plan for what you know best about yourself, because you're in a good space. You've done, at least some of your college, most of you. I don't know at what point you are. I guess I shouldn't make generalizations about our audience, but you know, you've done difficult things, you know what you struggle with, and you know what your strengths are. And ultimately, this is like an ultimate test of like self, like introspection and like self-control, and making sure that you stick to what you need. And if that means studying for 5 months instead of 3, or if that means studying for 1 month instead of 3, the way Abena did, you know, it's up to you what you need. So we can make broad generalizations, but understand sort of the spirit of what we're trying to say, which is don't prolong your study time for no reason at all. It's just going to stress you out for no end. So really do some good introspection. And I also wanted to sort of plug MedMentor's other initiatives, in which we have peer advisors, and it's people like us. I know a lot of us are peer advisors, and you can sign up with times with us if you want to discuss your individual situation, or if you want help crafting your own, you know, study path or whatever. We're happy to do things like that. But remember that this is supposed to be something that you craft for yourself based on your own strengths and perceived weaknesses. So hopefully that sheds some light on what we're saying. Sorry, Chang, you go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. I just like remembered like one other like thing that I did when I had studied that really helped with like my mental health was like finding like a study buddy. I think is like really a good way to like keep yourself like accountable, and like I think finding someone who's like also taking the exam like around the similar time as you. I remember like me and my study buddy, we would come up with like mnemonics together, and it just like on the exam I would like remember like the weird mnemonics we came up with, and it like helped me a lot. And it was also just like a breather, like a way to like, I guess like enjoy studying in a sense, even though it was like torture. So I think that was what I was going to mention. And I also agree with what Amelia is saying, just to echo that, like, I think that when I started studying, I got like so much advice from like so many different people. And like to the point that like I was like confused. Like people were like, don't make your own flashcards, like use like UWorld's flashcards, or like there was like a lot of conflicting like opinions about like when to use AMC. But I think in the end, just like do like what like works for you. So like for me, like I think making my own flashcards was like my way to help me remember. But like for other people, maybe like using like pre-made flashcards like helps better. So I agree that like I think our intent is like I don't think any of us want to like inundate you guys with just like a ton of like information or like advice, but I think in the end like you just have to dedicate time to it. I think like the resources are there. There's like so many resources, and I remember I downloaded like so many files onto my computer because I was like, I'm gonna review like all these resources, and I reviewed like maybe like 10% of like all the resources I downloaded, because it just takes like so much time. So I think just like if you dedicate enough time to studying, like you will do well.
The one disclaimer that I want to add is whatever schedule you do make for yourself to study, first of all, don't do like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and then do some extra, like that's too much. You are a person that needs to live, breathe, eat. Do not put those things aside. Do not put your basic needs aside for this. This is not important enough for you to put your basic needs aside. But the two main things I would put into your schedule. So great, do however you want to do your schedule. If you want to do content review, you want to do practice passages, however you want to do it. Two things. One, build in breaks. Always build in breaks to your study schedule, because that will make your brain so much more efficient, because you're not exhausted and burnt out and tired and sick of the material. And just, I don't want that when you take the exam, all you can remember is not your mnemonics and just like, oh my God, how much I hate this exam. And then the second part is build in buffer days. And what I'm saying about buffer days is like, it's just extra time for you. It's kind of like a break. You can take it as a break if you want, but also you can use it as like, hey, this week I was supposed to read on, I don't know, amino acids or terpenes, or I don't know, whatever, but I didn't get to it. But now I have this extra time that I can look at it in. And that way, that's just a little like, for me, this is how I work out my schedule. Like, it's just a little mental health trick so that you don't feel like you're behind, because you aren't behind. But oftentimes when we make schedules and we aren't able to fit everything perfectly and work with everything, you get so discouraged because you feel like you're drowning in like this massive information and things you have to do. So build in little buffers so that you can take a quick breather, but catch up on some other things too. That's all I have in terms of schedule.
Yeah, and again, just to echo what everybody has said, definitely do what works best for you, because you do know your study strengths better than anyone else. But definitely the like 18-hour days or 12-hour days. I don't know. I would definitely less than 10 hours. I would encourage you to do that, just so you can have like proper meals and you can actually go to bed on time. Just live like a normal person while you're studying for this exam. If it happens to be like you're able to take like a month off or 2 months off or whatever off for it, don't make it like a 12 to 12 thing like Candace was saying. Definitely like have fun, live while you're studying for the exam. It's not the be all end all. There's so many other aspects to your application, like everyone else has said. And so definitely just, again, live your life while you're studying for it, but do make some time to study for it.
Great. So maybe now we can get into some of the more specific questions from the RSVP. Of course, if the question doesn't apply to anyone, then we're just going to have to move like over the question. So we've already started talking about cars, and someone actually sent a Q&A in this live thing about cars. Do you guys have any crucial tips for tackling cars, or was there anything that helped you kind of get through this section, or just any advice in general about cars?
I would start off by saying that they're looking for very, very specific things in the passage. So if you can't find it in the passage, that's probably not going to be the answer. I'm not going to say for sure it's not going to be the answer, but probably not. And then two things from like my Kaplan history is, I guess, one is that you can look at anytime if you're confused, this is true for all sections, but it's the card as well. You can look at the answers, and usually the answers are several different kinds of wrong. It's like all or nothing, like the extremes. It's going to be the scope problem. So it's going to be like too broad or too narrow. It's going to be out of topic. Like the answer to the question is irrelevant, or that there's for one reason or another, it's an exaggeration of what the author was saying. So those are like good ways to start like looking at the answers, and you can start categorizing them. You can be like, okay, this one's wrong because of this one's wrong because of that. Okay, that leaves this. And then the final thing I'll say about cars is it's one of the few sections where you want to have kind of an answer before you look at the answer. So you want to have an answer in your head before you look at the possible choices for an answer. The reason I say that is because they write it specifically to confuse you. And so if you have no idea what's going on, that's okay. But try to formulate an answer first, because if you just start looking at the answers, all of them will kind of seem possible. And so it's going to be a lot more difficult than the biochem or the physics question to be like, okay, no, that's wrong because that's factually incorrect. So that's all I have.
And in terms of studying for cars, just again, practice questions. I think cars is the one section that I don't think there's a lot of content review you can do for. And so just, do those passages and time yourself as you're doing them.
Yeah, I think I didn't do super well on cars, so I feel like I can give you advice for like what not to do. So I think for me, because I came in with I had like a humanities background, I was like a political science major, so I thought cars was just gonna be like really easy, and I feel like because of that, I didn't like dedicate like enough time to it as I did to the science sections, which I felt was like gonna be like my weaker sections. Another thing I'll say is like I came in assuming that like cars would just be similar to like SAT critical reading, like back to like the last like standardized exam that I took. And I think that they're very, very different. So I think I came in with the mindset that like, oh, I can just use the same like tactics I use for like critical reading, but like cars is like a whole other like ballpark. So I would not like underestimate cars like I think I did. I think one thing that like I tried to focus on when reading the passages was to like go through like every sentence like very carefully and then figure out like the relationships between the paragraphs, in the sense that like, okay, is this paragraph like rebutting like what the last paragraph said, or like what is it adding to like the previous paragraph, and try like kind of understand, like have like one summary sentence of like what you just read like before you. Yes, highlight function was really helpful too, that Martina mentioned, using that a lot, and like just like before you look at the like questions, like having a good summary statement of like what did I just read, and like was this like a passage where you had like a rebuttal of like a main point, or was this a passage where you had like a description of like some topic of interest, or just knowing like what the point of the passage is, I think was important. But yeah.
Yeah, all these ladies have excellent advice. It was all advice that I was given and advice that I took that helped me on cars. I think the only other thing is that, like, this is sort of similar to what Candace was saying about the answers sort of being made to sway you in a certain direction. Something that I was told was that you're not looking for the true answer, because there might be a lot of answers that are like, technically, if you squint sideways, that like they're correct, but they're not the right answer. So you're not looking for true answers, you're looking for the right answer, and that can usually be different. And then something else that helped me is, so what I mean by right versus true is sort of when you think you found the answer, question, like probe a little bit and question, is this just true, or is it also answering the question that they're trying to ask me? And then my other piece of advice is try to understand the function of the passage, or the function of certain sentences in the passage. If I was reading a passage and I came across something that I thought was important to the way that they were trying to communicate the message, not necessarily like what the message was, but if I thought a certain sentence like changed the function of that paragraph, or really was the topic sentence for, or like the thesis of the whole passage, then I would try to highlight those, and that was usually what helped me. So thinking about like how the message is being communicated, not just like deciphering what the message is. I thought that changing my approach to that was really helpful and changed how I focused my time on the cars passages. I've also been told that not focusing, or rather not spending too much time on each question is helpful, so that at the end you sort of have more time for review. But I think review can sometimes be a double-edged sword, especially with cars, where if you take a second pass at it, you might convince yourself out of the right answer. But it was helpful for me. And so that was sort of a strategy I used, which is like, if the answer is not coming to me, I'm going to move on, and I'm going to prioritize spending less time per passage so that I have more time for review and I can always come back. Just because cars was something that for me was a little bit, there's only so much reasoning that I could take. And then after a while, it was a little bit like, what do I think the right answer is? Let's pick it and move on. I don't know if that's the best advice, but it's what I did, and I'm here. So I don't know.
Great. So does anyone have any advice for a second time exam taker?
Okay, I'll take this one since I took the exam twice. I just don't do what you did before. Honestly, my biggest problem. So like you really have to reevaluate like your study strategy. Someone mentioned introspection. You really do need to reflect on your whatever you've done, and what your target score is. Because typically you have the score that you got the first time, and then try to think of the score that you want to get and how to get there. And so if you want a huge jump, you really need to make some drastic changes. And so for me, it was just taking more time. I barely studied the first time. So it's just studying more the second time, and then doing a lot more practice questions, which again, under, how do I say, just, I feel like, I mean, now there's more emphasis on practice questions, but then when you still go online, you see a lot of like sample schedules that have a lot of content review. I'm telling you guys, practice questions are like the best thing ever. And so I did a lot more practice questions and a lot more targeted content review. And so my content review was to fill in the gaps where I was lacking. And that really helped, especially also if you have like, if you're limited on time as well. It's just a lot more practice questions, those AAMC questions. And then also I used UWorld, and that helped.
Thank you. So did anyone use Anki like before med school, like for MCAT studying?
I've always preferred Quizlet.
Okay. Is there any like Quizlet decks, or I don't know how it works. Like, did you make your own material, or is there anything online?
There's a lot of stuff that's already online. The only thing I would say is if you're not sure about a card, Google it or check your resources or check a textbook old textbook that you have. Like double check the information. Don't just take it as if it's like the word of God. Like definitely take it with a grain of salt. But for me, it saved me a lot of time. Like for me, spaced repetition is great. Making the cards myself would have taken forever, and I probably wouldn't have learned it as well as just doing spaced repetition. That was especially true for psych soc. So yeah.
I didn't use Anki because I didn't know about Anki. Knowing what I now know, so I was introduced to Anki in med school. I know I'm a little late to the game, but it's super West Coast thing. Yeah, out in the Midwest, I did not hear about it. But I think knowing now what I know about Anki, I think that if you choose to use it, forego content review entirely. Like just do your Anki, do your practice problems, and that is more than sufficient. Okay, and then also Anki takes time for the algorithm to work. You can't just do it and then be done with it. It's something that you have to start and be consistent about. And it builds because one day you feel motivated and you do a ton of cards. Well, the next day you're gonna have a ton more reviews to do. So it's a long-term game, and it's about stamina, which is fun because the Mcat is about stamina, and the Mcat is about a long-term game too. But so it's not a bad thing. It's just that if your study schedule doesn't cater to that, you will fail using Anki. So you have to be prepared to stick to the algorithm to really let it work. Otherwise, it's another sort of like rote, it's like an action. You're not really learning anything. It's not getting into your brain, or if it's getting into your brain, it's not sticking. So you really have to commit, I think, is the thing about Anki, if you choose to use it. I don't know what decks are out there, unfortunately, because I did not use it, but I use it for med school. It works when I give it the time to work. If I don't give it the time to work, it doesn't work, and it's a waste of time. So do with that what you will.
Yeah, I think just to go off that, so I used Anki for like a little bit in the beginning. It was mostly like as a way to study like on my bus rides to work before like quarantine hit. I would just like use the Anki. There's like an app that you can download on your phone. I think it's like $5 or something, but it's like I think it's so worth it because like I feel like I use my phone way too much. And then I just like purposely moved the Anki to like the center of my phone screen. So like every time I opened my phone, Anki was just like there. And I was like, okay, I have to like look at my cards now. So like I would like on my bus rides like to work and back home, I would just like use Anki then. And I think it was like a good way to like freshen up my like memory for the day. I also use like UWorld cards, and I would like make them myself. But I think the benefit of UWorld is like I really like their diagrams. I think they have like really like thorough and like really detailed diagrams. So I remember like the week before my exam, I would just like do like the UWorld cards like every day. And I think like I would just like put on the cards like questions I got wrong like in the UWorld. And I would just like review those flashcards so I could like remember like which questions I got wrong. And I think that really helped me for the exam. I also like made some of my own flashcards, but I think it was more the process of like writing them, like making the flashcards through which I learned. Like I didn't actually review them very often. So I think it was just like writing it down is what like helped me remember. But I have like a huge stack of flashcards that like I just never looked at. So I mostly just like looked at my Anki and my UWorld flashcards.
Like physical flashcards, Chung?
Yeah, I have like a whole like
too.
stack of just like physical flashcards, and I just like never used them. I just like wrote it, and then I like didn't. I didn't look.
I feel super old school because I have a fat deck of flashcards that I used for content review, especially for psych and soc. And then I came to med school and everyone's talking about spaced repetition and like online flashcards. And I was like, wow, I was really living in the past, wasn't I?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I definitely feel old school. I'm like not good at technology, and I sort of understand Anki, but like I don't really understand it. So yeah.
I had never heard of Anki as well. And so I used Quizlet. And one thing that I did to find good decks, I just Googled the the decks, and then I would quickly like look through them, or just you can quickly like browse through like a deck. I think you can have it in list view and sort of see like what's in the deck and see if it's covering the amount of information you want it to cover. Also, the other thing that I wanted to mention is like memorizing flashcards out of context can really, the information might not stick. And so what I would do is that I would just like flip through Kaplan to like just get the outline of the information in my head, and then like memorize the flashcards. And I feel like having that, just a, you know, that framework helped kind of with shelving the information in my head. And so yeah, that's how I use flashcards. I just did Quizlet for PsychSwoosh.
Okay, how do I know if I should change my MCAT date? So I guess, like, what are some red flags for changing your MCAT date because you're really not ready versus just being anxious and feeling like you want to just push your test date more?
I think at the end of the day, this is again what Malia said, introspection. It is about what score you want, and don't say like a 524 because that's just not realistic. That's never gonna happen. That's just like this is like a magical unicorn that maybe pops up, but it's not something that you can prepare for. Sorry, but I sorry, this is a classmate panicking about something. But I also think that part of it is that if you set a target score and you're close, that's okay. Just take the exam. You're not gonna. And honestly, the target score should be something like very reasonable. Don't be like, I want the 99th percentile, because like no. But at a certain point, you do have to recognize that if you've been taking like 3-4 practice exams and you've been hitting around the same relative point range, either one, it's not going to change drastically in the next couple weeks, or two, you have to do something very, very different for it to change. And so if you're still like a ways out from your exam, then yeah, do something really different. If you're pretty close to your date and you are relatively close to your score range, just go ahead and take it. Because no amount of like extra studying, like an extra week, an extra month, an extra 3 months is going to really help you do that much better if you're burnt out, you're tired, and it's just something's not clicking with you between you and the exam. And so that doesn't require you spending more time studying for it. That requires you figuring out what's the disconnect, right? Like what part of the questions, like what part of the answers that you're looking for are you not getting? Or what part are you tripping up on? What are the common mistakes that you made? And that requires more self-reflection and looking at the mistakes that you made on the exam and the practice exams, rather than like just pushing the date out. Because you can just keep doing that for the rest of your life. And it's just one of these painful things that you have to get over. So.
And something that I was considering as well was like, I ended up not pushing my date, but it was something that I was considering specifically because I was very anxious and I didn't think that I was doing very well. But it's just like Candace said, you have to really differentiate that from regular test anxiety. And you can only do that by knowing yourself. No one else can tell you what that experience is like. But something else that I had to consider was I had picked my original test date with a lot of intentionality, with a lot of, I'm sorry, it says my internet is unstable. I'm sorry if you can't hear me, but I picked it with a lot of thought into what the best time for me was and what my study schedule ought to be. And then if I were to change it and push it out, it was not at an ideal time, and it would no matter when I pushed it out to, it would never be at a more ideal time. And so for me, I had to wonder whether it was worth the aggravation of then, because I took mine in August, and had I pushed it, I would have had to study through the semester. And I knew that that wasn't going to be effective studying. So I had to weigh the like marginal benefit of pushing the date and the difficulty of like my current situation, and just weigh those two. And ultimately for me, it meant not pushing. For you, that might mean push it. Again, that has to do with you knowing yourself. So those are my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think going off of like what everyone said, like I think like taking the practice exams before, and I feel like it's like if you take the AMC practice exams, it's like a pretty close gauge of like how you'll actually do on the final. So like making sure like that's like within like a reasonable like target score, I think that's like a good way to know if you're like prepared. I ended up pushing mine back like I think twice, but it was because of like COVID. And so they just like canceled like all the tests for that month. And so I had to push it to like the next month, and then they canceled that month because of COVID. So then I ended up like pushing it to July. And I remember like, because I was like debating if I wanted to like take another gap year or just like YOLO and just like apply. So I ended up like applying like before I took the MCAT. So I feel like a lot was like writing on like my score, but I feel like sometimes you just have to like just take that leap. And I think I was like really in that position where I was like, I'm just gonna do it and like just like put my like just I guess like put my faith in like whatever happens will happen for a reason. And it like worked out okay. But I definitely feel that like echoing what everyone said, like you just gotta take the exam and just have trust in yourself. Like really trust your practice tests, because I think they are a pretty accurate gauge on like how you will do.
One caveat though is, sorry, really quickly, where you're getting your practice exams from. So the AAMC is going to be the closest to the actual exam. If you're taking like Kaplan, Princeton, Barron's, and I mentioned this earlier too, if you're doing any one of those, generally they're like a little bit to a lot harder than the exams because they ask you much more specific questions and they look for very specific content knowledge. And so just take those scores with a grain of salt.
Yeah, and I don't know about you guys, but I was definitely panicking before my exam. And I think it's normal. I do not have test anxiety. I've never had test anxiety, but before I took the MCAT, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna fail. My life is over. I went through I had a whole situation going. And so I think that reaction of obviously not to the skill that I had it is more typical than not. And so if that's kind of how you're feeling, like, oh, you know, I think it's normal for many people. And so don't let that dissuade you. We all had some kind of, I feel like we all went through something before the exam, and you're going to be fine. Like everyone else has said, just again, I scored pretty close to what my practice exam scores were. And so that's a pretty good indicator. And so if your scores are significantly lower than that, then again, you know, try to reevaluate and then maybe push it back. But if it's just, you know, like that emotional, like you just don't feel like that, if it's just that aspects of it, I think many of us have gone through it and you're going to survive despite how you feel.
And just another little tidbit is that like scores vary, right? Some days you'll score better, some days you'll score worse, and you can't really tell which way you're going to go going to the exam. So most importantly, please get sleep, get rest before the exam, because that'll do so much more for your score than like any kind of last minute studying will do. And just to emphasize Bennett's last point, like no matter what happens, no matter what score you get, no matter like how many times you have to take the MCAT, right? Hopefully only once, but you will be fine. You will be okay. And if you want to become a physician, if that's your end goal, you will become one. So do not let this be the thing that stands between you and your dream. That sounds very cheesy. Okay, but just don't make this the hill that you die on. Like you're gonna be fine no matter what happens.
And I just absolutely want to echo what Candace is saying here, which is that you're going to be okay. I know that we're coming up on the end, so I just wanted to drop a couple of other tidbits that really helped me, which is I did all my practice exams as if they were the real exam, meaning I got up at the same time that I would. I like took the time it takes to like travel to the exam, and then like I would eat my breakfast during that time, and then I would sit and I would do my timed exam the way the real exam was. And I was lucky enough to have a nice study space, so I did it in like a quiet place, like in my garage. And you know, that's how I did my practice exams. That really helped me simulating the real test day conditions, and then also, you know, what I would eat for my breaks and like what I would do to relax during my short breaks and my long break. All of those things helped me. And then the next thing was about sort of knowing when you're ready and like whether you want to push or whatever, is you want to have evidence sort of supporting your decision one way or another, and that only evidence comes from this practice that you're doing. So if the question is, should I push my exam? Well, then the question I would ask you is, why do you want to push it? Is it because your practice exams are not reflecting a score that you want? Is it because you're not answering questions correctly the way that you are hoping to be? Or is it because you feel unprepared? And if the question is that you feel unprepared and you don't, and your evidence is saying that you're ready, trust the evidence because you're ready. And if you don't have that evidence, it's because you didn't do enough practice exams. And yes, you should push and you should do more practice exams in order to prepare. So that's sort of how I would approach it, is, trust in yourself and trust in the work that you're putting in, and overall it will be okay. And taking it twice isn't the end of the world, clearly. And so, trust that it'll all work out. Okay, that's my soapbox.
So much great advice. We have a few more minutes and we have some pretty direct questions. Maybe we can just answer a couple more really quickly. So how many practice exams should I take? How many did you guys take overall?
I think I did 10.
And sorry, and where did they come from? What sources?
Yeah, so I think so 3 of them were at AAMC, and then I think the remaining were from Princeton Review, and those were the only things that I paid for.
Yeah, I think I took around 10 or 11, I think. I tried to get the free ones. So I know I think the first Next Step exam is free. And then I think if you get the Kaplan, I got the Kaplan set, which looking back, that was a waste of money, but it did come with some free exams. So I think I took 2 Kaplan. I took 1 Princeton, but absolutely destroyed my self-confidence because I did so bad on Princeton, and I was wow, I thought I don't know anything. And then I took the AMC, and it helped me regain my self-confidence again. So I think that Princeton was definitely the hardest test company I used. Kaplan was a little bit easier, but still kind of hard. I think Next Step, I got similar scores in the range of my AMC target scores.
On the opposite end of that, I didn't do nearly as many practice tests, and you will still be fine. I think even when I was working at Kaplan, there are 11 exams available to you, including the AMC ones, and we never recommend you take all of them, because it's kind of here comes the conflicting advice part, right? It's a lot about what helps you study the best, right? And it happens that we have a group that really studies well with doing the entire practice exam. Sometimes you can do practice passages instead. Sometimes you can just do the question bank and just do the discrete questions or anything like that. Any mix of that is still practice questions. You don't have to do 25 or 11 or any of those numbers, practice full length practice exams. If you have the time to do that, good for you. You can more than welcome to do that. But don't stress out if you don't have time to do that, or that's not going to fit your schedule. At the end of the day, this is very much about you and the way that you study and whatever works best for you.
And something quick to say, I took only the AAMC practice exams, and I think the important thing about taking practice exams is being able to really review them. I think sometimes if you take too many, you might not be able to fully review them and realize what you're lacking. And so I just did those ones, and then of course I did UWorld, and I would set the number of questions to however many questions there were for each section of the exam. So I'll set if it's 53, I don't remember anything about the Mcat, but 50 biochem questions that I had to answer in a typical exam. I would time it I was taking the exam. And so that's how I faked my way, timing myself, but not taking full exams. And then with the UWorld, of course, I got again, that review, which I think is the important aspects of taking practice exams, being able to go back and review them.
Highlight, bold, underline all of that, because being able to go back and look at your exam, one thing you can do is you can start categorizing the errors, right? Figure out, was this because I guessed it wrong? Because you also have questions that you will guess it right, and you still have to review those too. Is it because I had 2 choices and I just picked the wrong one? Is it because I read the question wrong? Is it because I read the answers wrong? Is it because I read the passage wrong? If you are able to categorize that, those the things that you got wrong, it really helps you to be able to go back and study, because then you can figure out was it a problem in content knowledge? Was it a problem in test taking strategy? Was it just a silly mistake? And that really helps you also feel calm, a lot calmer, because you start seeing like, okay, maybe I just have issues with like psych show, so specifically like anthropology concepts, you know, or like something like that. And that'll help you it'll help you feel better, because then you're not like this chaotic mess of like, oh my God, I know nothing. Because I'm sure you guys know lots of things, you know, so anyways.
Yeah, I just want to like, I know we're like coming up to the end here. So I just wanted to drop some also like overall like helpful tips. So going off of like review, I like didn't really use Reddit a lot before, but like I feel like Reddit like helped me so much, because like I feel like a lot of the AMC like explanations like weren't super like in depth. And when I went back to review like all the AMC exams, I wanted to like just like know like every question inside and out. So I would always just like copy and paste like the question onto Reddit, and like someone somewhere has like answered it. But yeah, don't use SDN though. SDN is like stressful. Also like I wouldn't trust everything you say on Reddit, but I feel like just like through like reading like the forums and like seeing like the ways that people would like approach the question or like think about it, I feel like it just helped me like think about the question and also the topic through like different like lenses. And I think it like overall helped me like understand the like fundamental concept better. I think this is like mostly helpful for like physics, or like the chem and phys section, I think, for me, because I remember I was like on so many different like Reddit like threads, and some of them had like really good explanations of some like really hard like chem and phys like topics, and I would just like really like try to understand like what people were talking about, and like that really helped me. Another like thing that helped me a lot was like this app called Forest. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but like it's like this time management app, and I would just use it every time I studied as a way to like get off my phone. So yeah, so those are just like some tips I have, but you guys will do fine. The fact that you're like coming like to like an event like this to like learn more about the Mcat like just shows like how much you guys are like focused on this exam. So you guys will all be fine.
Okay, thank you so much to all of our panelists, and thank you to everyone that came and joined us live. We'll have the recording up soon. And yeah, feel free to reach out. I think some people are sending emails in the chat. Feel free to reach out to any of us, or just like the MedMentors email, or use any of our other resources that we have. Best of luck studying, and try to enjoy your winter break. Thank you.